Pricing yourself is so hard. I always found. I still find that difficult. Because I think if you have any sort of self-doubt when someone asks you what you cost, it's for for various things, production or a show or whatever. I always found that tough. Now it's almost like I see what sacrifice it takes to like put together a show now or like do production, especially now I have a family. I might even be pricing myself out of work.
You were saying you don't leave the house for less than $5,000, right?
For the record, I did not say that.
Hello and welcome to Dropped. Hope everyone's doing well. In today's episode, we'll be finding out how our challenges went from the last episode. We'll be talking about our early days as struggling musicians, and we'll be talking about doing the work that we didn't want to do so we could eventually get to doing the work that we did want to do.
We're going to talk about social media algorithms and the challenges we all face with those. We will also ask ourselves if working for free really got us anywhere and what it actually looks like to get paid.
And Greg has his biggest success and his biggest failure on social media all in the same week. Thanks for being with us.
Let's get into episode 2. Hello, good morning, good evening, good welcome to Dropped, podcast with myself, Greg Holden, and
myself, Matt Belmont.
We hope you enjoyed episode 1. You clearly did, otherwise you wouldn't be here listening to episode 2. So anyway, thanks for tuning in.
So Greg, last week we spoke a lot about our journeys, how we got to the point in our careers that we're at now, and the many bumps in the road, one in particular, for which this podcast is named after. But I feel like one area where the listeners could be filled in a little bit more is where we are today and how we are running our things today, how we are running our businesses today. So how are you running Greg Holden Inc. in 2024? What are you focusing on? Are you touring a lot? Are you recording a lot? Are you aiming for radio? Are you focusing down a little bit more? Where are you at with that right now?
That's a great question, and one I'm still trying to answer myself, I think. I have made myself a lot smaller over the last few years, and I think downsized is probably a good word to use, for better or for worse, because obviously when you have a label, there's a huge team behind you, and then I found myself a couple of years later, managerless, labelless, booking agentless. I still have my lawyer, so that's good. But basically everyone had gone. And so, and I don't tour anymore either, which is kind of crazy because that was my identity for years. But touring just became a very financially irresponsible thing to do. And it also became kind of an existential thing for me because my entire identity was wrapped up in how many tickets I sold in different cities. And in many cities, Matt, believe it or not, that number wasn't that high. So I felt kind of shitty all the time especially when I was headlining. So touring right now is off the table, which makes me sad a lot. I miss it. So
sad,
I'm not touring. I'm thinking about doing a residency here in Portland, actually, a monthly residency, just to keep me playing, to keep me fresh. Because I noticed that when I play gigs now, I'm totally unrehearsed. My voice is sore. I don't have any banter in my back pocket, so I feel very uncomfortable on stage. I feel nervous, I've never felt nervous on stage. So it's a new feeling and I don't like it. So anyway, thinking about doing a monthly residency. And also I just finished recording an 11-song album that I am getting mixed and mastered right now and trying to figure out the best way to release it, which, we're going to talk about in this podcast a lot. Half the reason we started this podcast is so that we could both figure out how to release music in 2024. And so, I'm kind of waiting till we get through season 1 to figure out how to release this album. Maybe I'll learn a lot from our guests and have a much more successful go at it. But that is currently my reality, Matt. What about you?
A lot of that resonates. A lot of that feels similar. For me, going from like big team, downsizing, as you put it, Yeah, one of the first things that I did when I got dropped actually was I called around maybe like 2 or 3 days later, various members of my team. And I was like, hey, want you to hear from me. This is what's happened. I know we were all building a plan around this big major label release that was going to happen in a couple of months and this big tour that I was supposedly going on in a few days, but it ain't happening anymore. So I just kind of want to feel out how this affects things. Does this change anything with you and I working together? Do you want to continue working together? Are you still able to? I know all these people have bosses, you know, and sometimes they're like, they only want to work with major label artists. So I had those calls and some of the people didn't pick up. So they were answer phone messages.
Oh God.
But there are a few that did. And it was enlightening, yeah. I remember my booking agent, a guy called Johnny, he gave the best answer ever because he went, Matt, if you were calling me up and saying that not only that your label had dropped you, but that your manager had also left you and that your band had said they didn't want to play for you anymore, I believe in your music so much that I would go and knock on doors with you and it'll just be you and me doing this thing. He was like, I'll be the last person right there with you in the trenches because I believe in what you're doing and I believe in this album so much. And that was like, let me tell you, that lifted in like one of my lowest times, that lifted me up so much to hear that there was someone that guy was there before the label or the publisher or anything. He was one of the first people to get involved, and he works for a massive agency. And for him to like have my back in that moment where I felt so like such a failure and so low was really special. But yeah, I spent a while, like quite a while, putting a lot of energy into keeping up appearances and trying to still present as like successful. Everything's fine. Don't worry, guys. Yep, just a quick little footnote in whatever my post is. I got dropped, but yeah, don't worry. We're still doing this and we're carrying on and we're releasing the album. It's going to be fine. I tried to keep up appearances and I spent a long time trying to reject the fact that I've essentially been sent almost back to square one. Mm-hmm. By not just being dropped by the label, but the fact that there was a team of people around that who were believed in it because of each other. And when one fell away, another one fell away, and another one saw that one had fallen away and fell away. And before you know it, it's just you and, if you're lucky, you and your agent and your band members. So that was over the last 2 years, it was a realization that I had been sent back to that point. So where I'm at now is basically I might have been a little bit quiet since I released the album. I released the album and I did what I could to market it, but I realized that if I'm going to make a success of this, I'm going to have to learn to do everything myself, like truly everything myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that sounds very familiar to you, Greg. I know you do it so much. You do everything yourself, right?
I mean, not through choice.
Yeah. There's a few holes in my skill set.
Lack of options.
There was a few holes in my skill set, such as like producing and mixing and mastering and like portrait photography, short form video, like some pretty big holes in what I do. And I've always thought I did a lot, you know. I'd done my own cover art and I've always been heavily involved in my videos and things with a videographer, and same with photo shoots and production. I've kind of at times co-produced with a producer, but I've always had that person who like their job is producer. Or a recording engineer or a mixer or mastering engineer. Mm-hmm. I've always had those people where that's their whole life. Whereas now I'm like, I can't afford to pay anyone. So I either stop making music or I pick up these skills and I start becoming a total one-man factory.
Yeah, which is what we all kind of have had to become. We now we aren't just professional musicians. We're like filmmakers and photographers and graphic designers and PR agents and managers in some respects. We wear 7 or 8 hats now instead of one, and unfortunately, that often leads to the main thing suffering, mm-hmm. because you're too focused on all the other things that you used to have a team to do. But like you say, you can't pay those. It's hard enough to make a living anyway. What am I going to pay a photographer $1,000 for a photo shoot and pay a PR agent $5,000 to promote my album and then pay a radio plugger another $5,000 to get my songs on a few radio stations. Like, it's just not feasible. So you have to learn how to do those things yourself.
Yeah, or you just kind of look at where you are right now and you go, does this song need a radio campaign? Like, is it ready for one? And the way I'm thinking is when a song blows up on streaming or on socials, then at that point, I might be able to justify investing a little bit of money into radio or into PR. But just taking a wild shot at it without it blowing up elsewhere is just, it's pretty impossible. You now have to wait for the things that can blow up organically. Socials, maybe you get a sync. If you have a good sync agent, maybe you get some excitement on a playlist or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you support that with a little bit of investment. But the idea of just going single release, well, that means 5, 6, 7, 8 grand.
You just
Before
can't
I've
do it
started,
now.
you can't do it. No way.
Especially now with the amount of music that's coming out. I mean, you just can't. It makes zero sense. And to succeed now, you need 5 or 6 things in a row to happen simultaneously, really, to have a good shot at it. I mean, I had a label throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at my project on PR and tour support and radio plugging and all that sort of stuff. And still it barely worked. Still it was, and this was in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't even know. Like, if a band comes to me and they're like, we're thinking about hiring a PR agent, I'm like, don't do it.
Same. Absolutely. It's like the easiest answer ever. It's just do not do it. And I'm sorry if you're a PR agent right now, but
if you are, you get it.
If you are, you get it. Exactly. You shouldn't be working for people if their song isn't already blowing up, because what can you do for them?
What's your song in a magazine going to do? What's your song on a blog going to do? Kids, anyone really. I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt that people are looking for new music by scrolling through blogs or looking in magazines anymore. People just go on the internet and listen to the songs that they're told to listen to by the playlist. I can't imagine like that a magazine placement is going to change anyone's lives.
It's a place where we can actually give some really solid advice to some up-and-coming musicians, because we've had a lot of big placements and things. Like the type that I used to wish I could get, I've had a few blog placements like that, and then I've just sat on my Instagram that day and watched one new follower come in, and I'm like, I was trying to get that blog for so long, and I finally got it, and they put me on the homepage, and it's equals one new follower. And I don't even know if they came from the blog. I'm like, well, what was that about?
It's wild. And I just, that would be the takeaway. If you got $5,000 to spare, don't spend it on a PR agent.
Just spend it on music and video.
Yeah. Spend it on quality content. That's really all you can do. Don't spend it on quality content. Spend it on a camera and a lens and a light.
Well, you're leading them down the path of misery that we're on, where you have to spend all your time on YouTube tutorials and learn these weird little skills where you're like, you're watching a Skillshare video about how to tell a story in under 60 seconds.
It's amazing. It's amazing what I've learned, though. It's actually kind of great. Like it's kind of the fun of the job. Great, because although that is the last thing I should be doing, I should be working on writing new music. I have really enjoyed watching hours of video about lighting. I mean, thankfully, I actually have a degree in film production and music production, so I had a head start. And I did graphic design and photography professionally for years, so I had a head start anyway. But the technology's changed dramatically since I was a wee bairn, and so I still have so much to learn. But it's been fascinating, and I actually have really enjoyed that part of this evolution. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. Where are we now? Let's rein it in.
Yeah, let me just say that if I do get to a point where the budget comes in again, I will be outsourcing so much of this. But for now, it's just I want to release regularly. I want to release as regularly as I write songs that I love. You know, I want to write them, make them, get them out there, and not just get them out there and leave them, but support them with beautiful content. So at the end of all that, I guess where I'm at is that I'm done pretending that everything's fine and keeping up appearances. I believe that the music can speak for itself, and that's the most important thing. But the issue is that the music currently doesn't pay for itself, and part of that is because it's not reaching the fans, and this is something we highlighted up in the first episode. But yeah, that continues to happen, and that's a reason why we're here. Is I guess that's why we're here. But isn't that messed up?
Well, yeah, and that's what I was saying with my album too. And not really knowing how to release it anymore is because we have no idea how to reach our fans anymore. And that is why we're on this podcast, or one of the reasons why we're on this podcast, is to get to the bottom of that and figure out how to reach them and how to have a more effective release plan. Because currently we release something and it just disappears into this void of 100,000 songs a day, and gets swallowed up and doesn't exist as far as most people are concerned. And when you put that much
I've
work
got an
into
update for you, Greg.
what's that? It's 150,000 now.
It's 120,000 now.
Oh, Jesus.
That's the most recent figure.
It's gone up a lot. Most of them are fake anyway. But we can talk about that another time. It's just, you put this much work into anything. It doesn't matter if it's music or if it's film or if it's clothing design or building design, anything. You put that much work into it and then there isn't a profitable or productive way to release it. What the fuck are you doing? And that's why we're here.
And that is why we're here.
So, Matt, challenges. Episode 1, we decided to challenge ourselves. I challenged Matt to post an organic video of himself playing without a lot of processing, a lot of editing, a lot of effects, because all Matt's videos look very beautiful. So I challenged him to do something very simple. Matt, how did it go?
I broke some rules, I'll be honest. But I mean, I made it look nice, but I did strip back to just vocals and acoustic guitar, and it did well. I've been in this 300 view TikTok jail for quite a while. No matter what I would post, no matter what kind of angle I would come at it from, I would top out at 300 views. And this very raw, very kind of not try hard, just myself and my guitar in front of a microphone, got 700 views in the first few days and keeps climbing. Right. So you were onto something. What about you?
I saw the video, by the way. It looked beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How did your challenge go?
Matthew, my challenge was a fucking disaster. You challenged me to open a TikTok account and post 2 videos, which I did. And the view count was so low that I got depressed. And not that I give a shit about views, but it was shocking, quite shocking. The count was just a disaster. So I decided to not care and I just deleted TikTok off my phone and gave up.
God.
So the challenge, like I said, didn't go very well.
Well, I remember getting those text messages off you where you poured your heart and soul into these videos and you put them out and you were like, well, okay, what am I supposed to do? They're not getting any views. They're not getting any comments. They're not getting any likes. I've been up for a few hours now. And I was like, it is actually a mystery. Like, why is the engagement so low on these videos when the videos were like objectively great? So I had a little look over them and I couldn't really, without a kind of like 2024 eye on them, I couldn't see what was wrong with them. But then I started to like think about all the tips and tricks I've picked up. And I was like, let me see if I can cheer Greg up. So I took one of your videos and I did a little edit myself and sent it to you, didn't I?
You did. And something very interesting happened. So Matt sent me this edit and he did a great job, but still I'm kind of allergic to the way that videos are in 2024 and the way that things are framed. It feels very sales pitchy. So it made me a little grossed out when he sent it to me, but I knew he'd done a good job. So reluctantly I posted it and it became my most popular Instagram video of all time. So So clearly Matt knows what he's talking about, and clearly I'm just digging my heels in as some old fart. Anyway, what that did, though, was inspire me a little bit, because as artists, we like recognition. And I got recognition and was like, ooh, this is going to work. It's going to make me popular. It's going to make me famous.
Yeah, all of your principles just went out the window. Right?
Out the window. So I was like, all right, let's make some reels.
Sweet views started rolling in. And you're like, actually, I love TikTok.
Well, I think that challenge 1 went well. I think we learned some stuff. So that was good.
That's the main thing, right? Yeah, but I'm sitting here like all full of myself because I got you a successful reel. And I struggle to do it for myself.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. That's like, I can look at a friend's reel and immediately see what it needs. But like these things that I'm learning, I'm finding hard to apply to my own.
Well,
And
it's so easy to criticize other people and see what they need, and it's so hard to turn the mirror on yourself.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, so what I need is to train you up so that you can do the same for me.
Isn't that what this podcast is?
Exactly, yeah. You can be my objective eye. So I was thinking about some jobs I had earlier on in my career this week. I was thinking about the kind of those first jobs. I worked in a couple of shoe shops and I worked in a call center. I felt like I was falling apart after every shift.
Call centers,
get headaches and like neck aches and RSI, like 18 years old going on 70. Yeah, various jobs. I worked in a restaurant for a little while and didn't go well. And then I started to busk and I would do cover gigs and weddings and corporate gigs, very much be like a musician for hire. Sometimes it was really nice and fun and I worked with some lovely people, but a lot of the time it was like, this isn't why I'm in music. This is just a way to make money in music. Anyway, all that being said, it got me wondering, like, what was that beginning like for you? Did you have any jobs that kind of either pushed you way more towards music because of how much they made you realize this is not what I want to do with my life? And did you have any jobs in music that you did to be able to afford to do the thing that you really are in music for? So like say like to survive as a songwriter and an artist.
Well, I remember working in a sandwich shop in my hometown and the girl that I had a crush on came in with her boyfriend and told me that I was like that kid out of The Simpsons who works everywhere. And I was like, that fucking cut me deep, man, because I had so many jobs. I mean, I worked
like that is
the ultimate diss.
Burn. That is such a good burn.
It's just such a good burn.
That lives with you for how many years now? Like 25 years?
Yeah, that was like 30 years ago. It's just hurt like hell. But she was right. I mean, I don't even know how many jobs I had. I mean, from the age of 13, I was working. I had a job as a paperboy, and then I worked as a glass collector and a dishwasher. And as I got into adulthood, I also worked in a call center, which made me want to die. I worked at McDonald's. I worked at Tesco in a supermarket stacking shelves, which actually was one of the more fun jobs I ever had. And then I worked in London when I finally decided I wanted to be a musician, but I didn't have any fans or anything. I moved to London and I worked at the Apple store. Funnily enough. Yeah.
That sounds fun. Is it fun? Were you high-fiving?
It was actually a really great job. It was a really great job. It had its downsides, but it was at a time the iPhone had just come out. It was like my first day was actually the day the iPhone came out. And it was just a place full of creative people. Everyone was a filmmaker or a musician or a editor or every single person who worked there was in the creative field somehow. So at that time, it was a perfect job for me to have. But I don't like being someone's employee. I'm a little bit of a control freak and anti-establishment, and I hate having a boss. I always have. I've always hated it.
Same.
But to answer your question a little bit about music jobs, no, I never actually had a job in music before I became a professional musician, which sounds quite privileged, but it's not. I mean, it's not privileged because I did don't worry, I did the graft. I did the hard work. I just happened to jump ship right when I was ready to start making money as a musician.
Right.
I didn't want to do those grinding cover gigs because look, a little side note. I was a professional photographer for a while. I wanted to be a photojournalist actually in war zones, conflict war zones. That was like my passion for a moment. And there was a choice, music or that. And in the end, I chose music, thankfully. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be alive. But what was my point? Oh, I started to photograph things to make money, like weddings, portraits for businessmen, products. And it made me hate photography.
Right, right.
And what I didn't want to do is do the same thing with music and start doing all these cover gigs and wedding gigs and then start hating music, because I knew that that's probably what would end up happening.
It's a good lesson.
It's what had happened with photography. And funnily enough, 20 years down the line, there are parts of music that I hate because I did them as a job. Right. So it's funny how that works. But no, thankfully I didn't have to do shit music jobs, but I did have to do a lot of shit jobs.
So what was that point then how did you know you were ready to start earning money from music? Like where were those first paychecks coming from? Where you were like, okay, I'm making enough now. to quit the other stuff and be
Well,
a musician? Because that's like with music, I know how it is that you can get some checks in, but you don't know where the checks in 6 months are going to come from, or in a year, right? So it's always a brave move, it feels.
interestingly enough, I never made money in England as a musician and actually moved to the United States to start my career as a musician, where I knew I couldn't make money yet. So it was a leap of faith, to be honest. I had my job at Apple. I was making money. And then I was like, I'm going to be a professional musician. I'm going to move to New York City where I don't know how to make money. I'm just going to go and do it. And so really it wasn't like I was making enough finally as a musician to then transition and quit my job. It was like chapter A of my life, chapter B of my life, you know? And chapter B was, I have no idea. I'm just going to jump ship and see what happens.
So you had some savings, I imagine.
I sold everything. Yeah, I sold everything that I owned in England.
Moved to one of the most expensive cities in the world with some part-time job savings.
And just hope for the best. You know, and also
what was the best? Like, where did the money come from then?
Well, I had savings, which quickly disappeared. And then I had to come home because I ran out of money.
Right.
So I ran out of money after 3 months in New York, and I came home and I started touring around Europe and England, making money at doing house concerts and stuff. And then I ended up getting booked on a tour in America by Ingrid Michaelson because she'd seen me playing in New York while I was living there in a tiny little venue, which wasn't a money gig, but it was enough for me to get my visa to get over to the United States to go on tour. And so I made money on that tour because her fans were amazing and they bought all my merch. So I walked off that tour. That was my first American job. You know, it was a US world tour. It was a US tour. And so at the end of that tour, I actually got my first licensing thing. Like I had a song of mine on a show called Private Practice, which brought in what would have been a year's salary at the Apple store.
Wow.
In one sync. And so that was me off to the races.
Wow, I mean, it kind of sounds like something was conspiring in your favor there, the way that all kind of lined up. You go on a 3-month trip to New York, you play some shows, small shows. Ingrid Michaelson happens to be sat in the audience of one of those shows, remembers you enough to be like, I want that guy to support me, books you, but also books you on a tour where somehow you make a profit, which like never happens on support tours. Rarely.
Thankfully, she let me. She was so nice. I stayed on her bus with her whole band, so I didn't have any. I didn't have any expenses.
That's amazing.
So
I mean, I was going to say I've heard of that happening a couple of times. The other time was a friend who supported Passenger, and Passenger was like a total legend to him and did the same thing. But other than that, it's not that the main artists aren't being nice. It's just that it's kind of not expected.
It's not expected, and it was actually such an amazing thing because I just come home from New York after having these 3 months. The reason it was 3 months is because legally I wasn't allowed to be there for more than 3 months without a visa. Mm-hmm. So I had to come home, and I couldn't make money while I was there. Yeah, that was my goal though, Matt. You know, my goal was to go to New York, meet as many people as I can, go out every single night, play as many shows as I could, and just get into the ears of people, and hopefully someone would remember me. And Ingrid was that person, and it worked. That was my plan, and my plan worked. And so she invited me back to the US, and that was enough for me to apply for my O1 visa, which was enough for me to live in America for 3 years. So that was me. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to move to New York. And the tour was incredible, and people bought merch, and I didn't have any expenses. And the tour ended in Los Angeles, and I met up with some music licensing people. My friend Lynn Grossman, actually, she owns a company called Secret Road, and I signed to them. And then they got me my first sync on that show, Private Practice. And, you know, that was my last sync for a long time. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I just got, you know, this big sync, and I can do it. And I went back to New York, and I was able to live for a little bit.
That's amazing.
It's lucky. It's definitely, I definitely feel lucky that everything lined up like that. Certainly isn't common.
Yeah.
But that's how I knew I was on the right path. Anyway.
That's cool.
Enough about me. I'm going to turn that question back to you though now, Matt. What was the moment for you that transported you from part-time musician to full-time musician? Was there a catalyst? Was there a moment where you were like, fuck this, I'm going to go do this thing now? Or was there a moment that just naturally happened that lifted you into the full-time world?
I had it in 2 stages, and they were like quite far apart. So stage 1 was when I left Leeds College of Music, my university, when I graduated from there. I had been busking throughout, kind of like as a part-time musician, part-time student, part-time musician, sometimes part-time restaurant worker, part-time shoe shop worker. And when I left, I was like, well, I can either get sucked down this kind of like an employment route, or I can just be like, this is when I'm going to do it. And what's the point of getting a music degree if you're not going to try and do it? So I started busking every day I could. Wasn't quite bringing in enough money. So I was like signing on to the job seekers allowance in the UK for only for a few months. And then I got this gig like hosting an open mic in Leeds, which ended up lasting for a couple of years, but it would bring in just enough that I could stop signing on. So that was my reason for kind of leaving that. And that started this 7-year journey of like, I'm a full-time musician, but I was a full-time cover musician. Like all my money was coming from covers. In my heart, I was an original musician. Monday to Friday, I'd spend every minute I could writing songs, recording demos, writing with other people, learning production, like just working on original music. Friday night, Saturday daytime, Sunday daytime, I would be either playing a gig or busking if the weather was okay. And it was like, when am I going to do? I always knew there was a second stage, and it was a really important stage for me, which was being full-time original musician. When am I going to be able to do that? So touched on last week, like the whole success of my song Hollow. That came in 2017. So that's like 6 or 7 years after I've left university. I was like, well, now can I? And still, like, no money was coming in. It was just, there's such a delay between success. You touched on this last week with Home, between success and royalties coming in, that I was like, well, I still can't survive. So what ended up happening then is I was gigging more than ever. I was doing like, it was a weird period. So I was like, with Belmont, we were booked. I remember this one time we were booked to go and play a show in Luxembourg supporting Kaleo, and it was to 5,000 people. And we played it on like a Wednesday or a Thursday. 5,000 screaming fans, amazing, like dressing room, treated like royalty, signing CDs and posters afterwards. Got in the van, drove back. And then Friday night I was playing at a place called St. Christopher's Inn, which is in London Bridge, and is like a hostel where they go till 2 a.m, and there's always a guy playing acoustic covers, Don't Look Back in Anger, Sex on Fire. So I literally just went from Luxembourg, 5,000 people, out of the van, grabbed my PA system into my car, drove to this gig, played for 3 45-minute sets of like Mr. Brightside, Don't Look Back in Anger, Sex on, all of that kind of stuff. And people not giving a shit, like spilling beer on my pedals. And just like, it was really rowdy bar. It was kind of fun, but it was just like, what is going on? And then the next night I had 2 gigs. I had busking. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to destroy my voice because I'm recording parts, like vocal parts for the EP we were working on. I was singing all the time. And I had another one a few months later where we got booked to play a festival to 14,000 people in Germany. We opened the festival. Macklemore headlined it. There was only 6 people playing it. Again, amazing experience. Got back, 2 cover gigs in one night. And it was just like, this is unsustainable. But where like the money isn't coming in because those gigs were great, but you get paid 500 euros for them or something. Yeah. There's 3 of us and we're renting a van and driving across Europe to play them. So there's no money coming in. There's no profit. That's just do it to reach the fans. So the point where I could actually finally think about moving to full-time original musician was when in 2018 we had these negotiations back and forth with a big publishing company, Warner Chappell, who I'm still with today, who led me to meet you actually and co-write. But
my old publishers.
Yeah, and eventually I got offered a publishing deal from them, and in that publishing deal was enough money to kind of pay for the band to move around and record an EP and buy some equipment, and also because I was full-time working on it, it was my publishing deal for my songwriting. There was a couple of years worth of modest wages in there, and I was like, oh, can I finally do it? Like, could I? And I think it was like October or November 2018 that I finally did make the jump and become a full-time original musician, and I've been one ever since. Never with like a massive return, but feeling whenever I actually think about it, I'm super happy that I can do that and proud that I can still call myself a full-time original musician, even though it's getting more and more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, congrats, man. You know, I think that
Thanks, man.
It's anyone that can achieve that level of success. It's so funny because there are all sorts of different levels of success and they also fluctuate. We've both had our moments on the top and we've both had our moments on the bottom. And I think anyone that can sustain a living from doing something they love is phenomenal. So good job. I also have to learn that lesson sometimes too. I've been doing this now professionally since 2009. It's now 2024. That's 15 years of professional. That's more time being a professional musician than having shit jobs,
Yeah.
So
That's
that's kind
amazing,
of
man.
crazy to think about. But it's so funny for anyone who does have a job in the field that they love. I hope you don't feel the same way, but I'm sure you've had the moments at least. You forget that we used to love this. Oh, you forget that you love it. Sorry, let me rephrase that. But I sometimes hate this. I sometimes curse that I'm in the music industry. And then I remember how lucky I am,
Mm.
how good it is that I'm able to, I don't have to go to do a shit day job and make sandwiches anymore. I don't have the girl that I had a crush on telling me I'm the kid from The Simpsons. I don't flip burgers anymore. And that's a luxurious, privileged position to be in, I think, because some people who are way more talented than I am are probably out there doing a job that they can't stand, So I have to count my blessings every day.
These things are all like steps on that path, though, right? Like one thing led to another, and they're not completely disconnected. And if you are listening and you're thinking, damn, I am flipping burgers, it's like, that's like, we're talking about working hard here and having like focus on a dream, on a bigger dream, and flipping the burgers is part of the path to that dream, right? So don't feel down on it.
We also have a job that is glamorized. And unfortunately, it's not all glamorous. And I think that's the issue that we face sometimes, especially when we started, is, I want that job because it looks like I can just have sex with models and do drugs and have tons of money and live in a massive house. And that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to achieve that. And then,
You're not doing those things.
No. And sometimes you get lost because you start to succeed and you don't realize that you're even succeeding because you haven't done all those stupid cliche things that everyone expects you to do. But somehow you find, oh, wait, it's been 5 years since I've been doing this and I haven't had another job. Oh, I guess I'm a professional. And you don't realize.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a moment where it's like, you have succeeded, Well, that'd be the wrong sound. It's not like someone hands you a pass and says, you are now a professional at your craft. It takes time. There's a process and there's not like a one moment where it happens, I suppose, which is what I'm gathering
but
from
it's rough.
this conversation.
It can be rough to make your passion your career. You touched on that right at the beginning. And that's just part of it, isn't it? It's like, I love writing songs. I love singing songs, performing. Like, I never regret that. I'm never stood on a stage thinking this is shit. I'm rarely in a writing session because now that I'm careful with who I write with, I'm rarely in a writing session thinking this is shit. Mm-hmm. But the industry can be really, really shit. And like, that's a running theme throughout this podcast. It's like, this industry is like kind of an unregulated mess where there are sharks in the waters and you have to kind of navigate it and you get screwed every now and again. So that's what we're talking about when it's referring to like, sometimes I hate this. Like, that's going to make you hate it in a way. It doesn't mean you hate performing or music or any of the great parts, And
that goes back to what I was saying earlier about being a photographer and shooting weddings and shooting portraits of businessmen. There are those aspects of our career that happen now. Like, I still do the equivalent of that in this job. You have to, especially now, as our income becomes less and less. There are those things that we have to do that we don't want to, as Matt touched on earlier.
For sure, yeah. It's the same for everyone, isn't it? It's just, I think part of what we're doing here is just demystifying the music industry, because we don't want you to think that we're sitting here feeling like we have it rough on the scale of jobs or day-to-day work, It's just to say, there's like, we're all the same, I'm sure you guys have the same in whatever you do.
I'm sure Bradley Cooper's sitting in his massive house in LA, thinking about things that are pissing him off about his industry, Yeah. I mean, it just happens. And I think to wrap this part of the conversation up, I think that we're very fortunate and we've worked hard to get where we are, but it doesn't mean there aren't hardships in our jobs. But I think, Matt, I'm proud of you for making it this far. I think it's two lads from the north of England making it in the music industry, I think is a big deal.
Same to you, man. And now it's just about what we do next.
These are long, long days. These are long, long days. These
are long, long days. These are long, long days. These are long, long days. These are long. Pricing yourself is so hard, I always found. I still find that difficult, because I think if you have any sort of self-doubt, when someone asks you what you cost, it's for various things, production or a show or whatever. I always found that tough. Now it's almost like I see what sacrifice it takes to like put together a show now, or like do production, especially now I have a family. I might even be pricing myself out of work.
You were saying you don't leave the house for less than $5,000, right?
For the record, I did not say that. But over years and years of doing this and developing the skills to do it professionally and knowing what it takes, if someone actually asks me, like, what do you charge? I think, well, I'm going to have to leave my home, my family. I'm going to have to get on a plane, probably. I'm going to have to fly somewhere. I'm going to have to get a hotel. I'm going to be inconvenienced in that. I'm going to be spending money on food while I'm out. There's all these expenses that go into it. I mean,
yeah.
If you're lucky, they'll pay your expenses as well, but that doesn't always happen.
When you've done that a few times, you kind of like, you're over the novelty.
Yeah, you're not 20, like it's your job. And same for producing. I think I worked in LA for free for like 4 years. I think I told you this, but like I was doing 4 to 5 sessions a week, writing, producing, almost developing artists, and their labels wouldn't pay me. I mean, this is not just me. It happens to everybody. The only time you actually get paid is if they decide to record it. And generally, if they're on a label, you get paid a production fee, and that could be $1,000, $1,200. I think the highest one I ever got was $2,500 for a production fee, but that is me waiving my right to own the master. That's me like handing them my tracks, and then basically that's what you get. You get $2,500 maximum. Where was I going with this?
Old man yells at cloud, I think. No, but seriously, you're totally right. Baby. It's a real issue in the industry.
But like you get, oh, that's what I meant. Yeah, like that's what I was saying. Is like I work for free, and then occasionally I'll get this like $1,200 for this track that you did, and that continued for 5 years in LA. And I can count the amount of times on my hands that I got paid, and the rest of the time I just worked for free.
You landed on an important point there, I think, which is the way that demos are produced these days. Which is, I think they used to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this was before my time. But I believe there used to be like multiple demo fees or a demo budget built into record contracts, right? Where the producer would be paid to work up a demo for the record company. But now what happens is they just put the producer in the session. So the producer now quite often, and not taking away from producers that do a lot of writing as well, I've certainly experienced maybe 50% of the time producers in sessions who really shouldn't be in the session because it's like a removed job. It's a job that should happen after the session. But whoever's in charge has realized that if you put the producer in the session, they then get maybe a third or a quarter of the songwriting credit, and they don't have to be paid a demo fee necessarily. I don't know who's winning there, really. The writers they're losing a big chunk of their songwriting. I've been in sessions where the producer hasn't really written a word, but they've sat and started working up the demo, which, not taking anything away from their talent, like incredible, very valuable talent that is a very necessary part of the process. But why is that not happening after the song's done? The reason is probably because the label would then have to pay a producer fee, and they're trying to save on that because they've got thousands of sessions happening every day.
Yeah, exactly. And the fee happens now only if it gets cut generally. Mm-hmm. And not even cut, released. Because I've had songs that have gotten cut and never released and I haven't been paid for them. I mean, shit, I've got songs that have been released right now that I'm still waiting to be paid on from years ago.
Or they get recut, right? Like the demo.
Well, that's the frustrating thing that happens to me a lot because I don't know, like maybe it's the way I record things. Maybe it's because I'm not established as a producer yet. But what would happen to me a lot, and still happens, is that I'll record a demo on the day with a person, and then the label will go, "We love this song. Can we get the stems?" Or the tracks or whatever. For those who don't know, that means basically the recording tracks from that day.
So
separated tracks.
So acoustic guitar on 2 tracks.
And the vocal tracks and then the bass track or whatever. And essentially what they'll do is they'll take your tracks and they'll give them to another producer who's more established, who will then either re-record them or just use them and put things on top. And then the song will come out and you haven't been paid or credited. This just happened to me a few weeks ago. And you're like, you hear the song and you think, wait, that's me playing guitar. That's my bass track. oh, it sounds like they've put real drums on, but the drummers doing the fills that I
Yeah.
programmed. Oh, that's my voice in the background. And that happens, and you're like, "What the fuck? Did I just get ripped off?" And the answer is yes, you did. You just got ripped off.
What do you think of the counter?
God, it sounds so bitter. I'm not bitter. I really am not bitter. It's just like part of our job that we have to navigate,
It's an unfair part, like reality in the industry, and it
Yeah.
happens all the time. It definitely does. I've witnessed it many times. What do you think about the counterpoint of songwriters getting points on the master in exchange for their
I think
time
it's a
in the
great
session?
idea. I mean, I think that's a great idea. I mean, in an ideal world, songwriters would get paid for their time in a session. Something needs to give for these songwriters. Plenty of people in LA, plenty of songwriters are just broke.
Hmm.
I mean, there are hit songwriters in Nashville. They're not hit songwriters, but there are people in Nashville who have written number one songs who drive Ubers.
Yeah.
There was like someone who wrote a New York Times article I forget where it was, or the Atlantic or something. She's a professional songwriter. She had number one songs in Nashville. She was driving Ubers. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about the entitlement and like we expect to be paid. It's like, but we are making companies so much money with what we do.
Hmm.
Why aren't we being paid fairly? But we need to get paid on a daily basis. Otherwise, it's literally not sustainable.
Well, the back end has collapsed, doesn't it? It used to be that you'd turn up and you'd shoot your shot, knowing that if it pays off, if you do write a hit, then you're going to get so heavily compensated on the back end as a songwriter that you're not going to have to worry again. Now that has collapsed in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get exactly what you've just said. You get people who've written hits who don't have anything like financial freedom. They still have to work the same jobs as the rest of us, and that's really really unfair. I know there's been a big point made by being a cause champion by Ray in the UK, an artist who won a bunch of Brit Awards this year. She made the point of pay songwriters points on the masters, please. And yeah, just to fill the listeners in, I think it's about, as far as the royalty generated by the songwriting side of a song. So quick history lesson, quick backstory. When you write and record a song, there are two different copyrights created. There is the master side and there is the publishing side. And that is why you have record companies who deal in the business of exploiting the master recording. So the actual that recording done on that day. And then you have publishing companies who deal in the copyright generated by the song. So the lyrics, the melodies, the chords put together in that order creates a copyright. So they would both then go off and exploit them in different ways. Record companies would create a bunch of vinyl and promote and sell those. And publishing companies would find placements for your songs on TV and film and track your royalties as the songs are played live and as they're played on radio and exploit in those ways. But the way the music industry is set up today, there's a giant imbalance between how much is being generated from those two sides. Because streaming is bringing in about 4 times as much for the master side. So yeah, that means that songwriters are really not making much at all from Spotify. So every time you hear an artist complain about low streaming rates, you can take the fact they're not happy and times that by 4 for every songwriter. Not to mention that they're having to split the songwriting with anyone who jumps on the song afterwards.
And meanwhile, the label is making 4 times as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
essentially. And it's and I hate it. Sounds like we're complaining all the time, and it's like this entitled feeling of like I should be being paid more, but like it's really not possible for us to keep doing it if we don't get paid at least fairly. It's not like people are asking for millions,
especially as
But anyway,
like the overall. If you look at the chart of overall earnings or overall wealth generated by the music industry over the last 30 years, you see like a massive peak coming off the back of the 90s. It starts to dip, I think, around the mid 2000s when downloads and Napster appear, starts to kind of fall off a cliff. And then streaming comes in and there's a little bump, but it's just nowhere near recovered. And then vinyl starts to have a resurgence through the kind of 2010s. Streaming starts to really pick up pace. And we're almost like we're getting close to being back where we were now.
Really?
Yeah. So as far as wealth generated
except
by the
it's
industry.
so imbalanced. Like you said, it's so imbalanced.
Yeah, it's just like the wider economy, isn't it? Billionaires and the rest of us.
And I'm coming from a privileged point of view. I wrote a hit song 10 years ago, so I still, I make half decent money from that still. So I'm coming from a place of great fortune in that sense. But I also don't make money from things that I do anymore, which is terrifying. Like my art doesn't make me money anymore, and that's a little unnerving. It's a little scary, especially since I just had a kid and like you know, all you have to do is take away the income from that one song that I wrote 10 years ago, and I'm fucked.
Yeah. But it's also like,
And
it's important.
that's a little
It's
scary.
important that people in positions of privilege speak up, you know?
But well, people give me shit. Like, I got friends who give me shit when I talk about this stuff, when I complain about Spotify and royalty rates, because like, shut up, you wrote a hit song, you're fine. That doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to talk about the problems in our industry.
Well,
And also, I won't be fine. I won't be fine if this shit keeps going.
I mean, it
You
makes
know?
it more hard hitting almost, you know, if you can still see the problem and point it out,
Yeah.
despite being okay yourself, you know. It's just because you've gotten somewhere doesn't mean that you don't have a valid voice in this. So I've got a good one for you for this week's challenge, I think, Greg. I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, how can I push Greg out of his comfort zone? But
I'm glad that's your main focus, is pushing me out of my comfort zone.
How can I push just enough that he doesn't push back too hard, but also in a way that could be effective based on some things I've learned recently about like social media, but also in a way that fits you and fits your brand. And I was thinking about where you live and the pictures I've seen of it and things. And yeah, so anyway, cut to the chase. Here's my idea. You go. You're already I can already feel you pushing back.
I'm like hovering my finger over the stop recording button right now. So,
So here's the idea. So you go. I know that you live in the beautiful city of Portland, but I also know that you live in a particularly green part of this beautiful city of Portland. I've seen some drone footage hovering above. You want to walk through a beautiful forest. And it made me think of a reel I watched recently, which talked about like how much higher the like watch time is and the retention level is on videos that are shot either out in the wild in like a city where anything is possible. You know, like you're watching the video and you're thinking, oh, what if someone tells them to stop singing, or what if someone runs through the frame? Because of that chance, people will continue to watch for longer. But the other thing that had retention, because I know that you're not going to want to go out in the middle of a bunch of random people in the middle of Portland and start singing. So the
you
other
couldn't
thing,
pay me enough money to do that.
The other option, lucky for you, is that if you sit in nature somewhere beautiful, and it gives someone this tranquil break from the mad, chaotic scroll,
Go on.
and you perform with that backdrop, find some beautiful light coming through the trees, then it has the same effect. So I was thinking, just to push you out a little bit, I'm not saying I'm going to stop pushing at this
know
point.
What you're thinking.
I'm thinking you walk to that lovely forest at the end of your road with a guitar on your back and an iPhone in your pocket and maybe a tripod, and you sit on a little tuffet, are they called?
Tuffet.
A little Miss Muffet sat on,
A little
you know?
troll hole.
Find a little troll hole to sit on, and you play us a song, and we see if that, and we just test because I mean, I saw a reel that said it. It's not science right now, but it will be once we start testing it. What do you think?
I think, in the spirit of being open-minded and not completely closed off to new ideas, I will take you up on that challenge.
You'll do it?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Beautiful. Wow.
I was going to show way more resistance, but I realized that's probably not a good look. And also, what are we here for?
Greg Holden, man of the woods. So what you got for me?
I'm going to push you one step further because I know where you are right now.
Oh, no. What?
You are in the home of the mafia in Palermo, Sicily. So I think you head out into those dicey streets of Palermo. Find a little corner. I'm not going to make you do it in front of everybody.
Wow.
Find a beautiful little corner.
I think the corners are more dangerous.
Ooh, I wonder if you could do it inside of a church.
Oh, there's lots of those.
You have a distinct advantage acoustically over me.
Yeah.
If you can find yourself a little church or something like that. You might even get yourself an audience, a few nanas.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
I like this idea. I mean, I feel uncomfortable about it because I don't fully speak the language. I speak a little bit of Italian.
Non parli italiano.
Yeah, exactly. And a tiny bit. But if I can get them to just let me start, I think they'll let me finish.
I mean,
Um,
one thing I know about Italians is they absolutely love people singing and performing.
right.
You'll probably get a bunch of fans over the age of 85.
So I need.
They
I
love it.
definitely
They
need
love it
my.
because they love art. They love passion. They love, I don't know. I wish I was in Italy to do this challenge right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, good for the demographic. Average age of listener
Your
next month
TikTok followers
will
might
be
not go up,
75.
but you might get a few people making you lunch.
Yeah, on jeansreunited.com, I'll be a trending artist.
Dude, last time I sang in Italy, it was at this house, and the neighbor came by, and all of our friends were all musicians, and we were there singing in a little circle. And the dude showed up with like all this old wine and food, and he like
Nice.
spoiled us for a whole week because he just thought we were the coolest because we were singing. So I think you're in a distinct advantage right now.
Okay, I accept your challenge. It's going to be tough, but I'm excited about it.
I think yours is going to be great. I have faith.
I think yours is going to be great.
That voice and those acoustics, you can't go wrong. But rest assured, I am deeply uncomfortable with the idea of this. Just because I accepted the challenge doesn't mean that I'm happy about it. But
it's just you and the.
wouldn't be a challenge, would it? Yeah, if I get eaten by a bear, that would actually make for great content.
Yeah, exactly. I'll still post it. That'll make for an interesting episode 3.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Greg is no longer with us. He was mauled by a bear, completing the challenge that I set for him.
While singing beautifully, my God.
I'll try and
that last note he sang, that high note.
Well, thanks for joining us for episode 2. We appreciate it. We hope that you found it interesting. It's still a work in progress, to be honest. We're still figuring out how to do this. We've never done this before, so any feedback is welcomed. We appreciate you being here. If you made it to the end of this episode, then we must be doing something right, so we appreciate you. And we will see you next time.
Lots of love. Bye.
Ciao. If you want these podcasts early and ad-free, because who likes ads, consider becoming a patron of ours at patreon.com/droppedpodcast.
You can also email us at droppedpod@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram and Threads at droppedpodcast. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.